Malcolm X said this: usually when people are sad, they don't do anything. They just cry all over their condition. But when they get angry, they bring about a change. We are talking about avoiding problems and avoiding issues in the relationship and the actual physical manifestations, the stress, the things that come with you not actually dealing with problems and bringing about change in the relationship and actually bringing things to resolution. We know through science and studies that there's physical symptoms that actually bring a wedge between you and your spouse, you and your partner, you and your fiance, when you do not bring things to resolution. And some of those symptoms are headaches, upset stomachs, elevated blood pressure, chest pains. Maybe you have problems sleeping. There's low energy. There's stomach problems. Got acne, anxiety disorders, burnout, depression, diabetes, digestive issues. You get the point. If you're avoiding issues in your relationship, they may be something may not happen now, but it may affect you a little bit later. Welcome to another episode of Amplified Marriage. I am Brian.
I'm Natalie.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you hear say this all the time. Grab a coffee, grab some tea, get comfy. But today we're talking about something that is actually extremely important to relationships and to marriages, and just to actually being better communicators.
And it's important to us because we have lived in this state.
Yes.
For a long time, and sometimes even now, being married, for 22 years, it still tries to creep back in, and the tendency to want to revert to old ways of doing things isn't gone completely. Like I still have to make a conscious choice to not resort to old patterns of destructive behavior.
Right.
And even as you were mentioning, some of the ailments that come from an increased state of tension and stress, I could not help but be like check,
right,
check. And we're going to talk about that because as we've been researching, and we're not doctors and we're not clinicians, and super grateful that other people are wired and gifted in those areas to be able to bring about the research that we're going to talk about today. One of the things is stress and what that does to our mental state, our emotional state, our spiritual state, our physical state, and how that applies to conflict resolution and just being in a state of being able to assert yourself in communication and not, and hopefully, I don't know, maybe go as far as saying resolve some of these issues if these are a lot of issues that are stemming from a state of tension and stress.
Or at least being willing to face them, maybe. Maybe that's and here's the thing, like today, this particular episode is really just a snapshot, like an intro into what we believe is a real problem for so many marriages, and we're talking about this, like, why is this so important that we discuss? Because we see marriages that are actually struggling in their relationship because maybe they're confronting the issue in some cases, and in some cases we see couples that we know, that we coach, that aren't actually addressing the issues.
Yep.
And so you have both sides. You got people that are confronting the problem but never coming to resolution, and those that are avoiding the problem and still not coming to resolution, and it still brings about the same result.
Yes.
As there's no resolution and there's stress. And so why is it so? Because it's so important because people in your relationships, if you're not dealing with them, it'll cause undue stress, like some of the things that I read, like the physical ailments. And then as we go in the next few episodes, what actually is so important and why you deal with it, now there's emotional, and you said spiritual, there's physical, there's mental health, that all gets wrapped up into not dealing with it. And it's so important because it can lead to, ultimately, it may bring you to a place where your relationship fails because you just avoided the issues instead of dealing with. And I don't like, this is the thing, you hear that saying, oh, we just swept it under the rug. Well, the problem with sweeping it under the rug is that eventually that rug turns into a giant pile.
That's right.
And it's just filled with all the problems that you've just lifted up the rug and shoved it underneath. And it's got anger and anxiety and abandonment and frustration and bitterness and rage and all kinds of things that are just piled high because you didn't want to deal with it. Yeah. That may cause so much problems that you can't come back to a healthy relationship.
That's right.
Which I say that, but we always really believe that almost every relationship can be restored.
Yes.
Right?
And stress worsens your situation. It can worsen the symptoms that you're feeling.
Well, it amplifies.
Like
amplified marriage.
In the wrong way.
Yeah.
And it can also worsen certain diseases that you might already have, right? Like not everything is caused by stress, but a lot of things are induced by stress.
Right. And that being said, like when you don't come to that resolution, and even in some of our preparing, there was something that we heard. It was the fight, flight, or freeze.
Yes.
And it harms your body to constantly be in a state where you're fight or you're flight or you're in a freeze.
That's right, because your adrenal glands or your adrenaline, right, is constantly firing. Your cortisol levels are skyrocket, which, isn't great for your health and like your organs and things like that. You're always in a state of, am I ready to fight for my life? Am I ready to run for my life? Or am I freezing because I'm paralyzed by fear? Right. And there's some physiological issues that happen when our bodies are in a constant state of that.
So which one do you think you are? Or were? Where would be the better way to approach this?
Between the three?
Yeah.
Fight.
You think you were the fight?
Yeah. What? You not agree?
No, not at all.
What do you think I was?
You were the flight.
What?
For the longest time in a relationship, I would want to deal with things and you would just...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see. I'm talking about like when I was under stress though. Yeah, that's true. Now I'd say I'd be fight.
No, because I'm always fight. I'm like, which drives you bananas because I'm ready just to face.
Okay. In retrospect, it was probably flight or freeze or just shut down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Shutdown was a big part of your repertoire of what to do. Is like flight or I just don't want to talk to you because you're. And let's be honest, like it's not like I was like super good at like. We need to have, you know how you see it in the movies when two people are really healthy in their relationship or you're reading a book and they're like, do you know what, I think you and I need to have a chat. And you're like, oh, okay, let's go have a chat. And they just calmly talk things through. And at the end, there's this moment and the cameras just zoom in onto their faces and there's just pure love. No, usually by the end of our let's have a chat, it was a screaming match. And we ended up like I slept on the couch or you slept in like that sunset on your wrath thing didn't really work out for us sometimes.
No. And I highly doubt we're alone.
Yeah, right.
In that,
That's
right?
true.
And I mean, one of our major, huge struggles and biggest tension, stress issues in our marriage was finances. And we had mentioned in several of our earlier podcasts about that being kind of one of the major...
Because we was broke. And we didn't spend well when we had money.
That's right. We did not steward our money well because we had an unhealthy relationship with our money.
Right. And so what we're saying is that this is the beginning of what we hope is going to be an informative few episodes that are really going to help you and your partner, your spouse figure some stuff out and actually resolve some issues. And understand why that there's actual, like you can, like I'm the king of like, I can deal with stress. But I've noticed in my older age, I can actually handle way more than I could when I was younger. But I also am much more aware of what things are causing me stress and what isn't.
Right. And maybe you are in a position where you're like, oh, I've been feeling some of these things that we've been talking about. And the hope is that maybe you can have a light bulb moment of like, maybe I am stressed out. Maybe there is tension here that I didn't realize could be a contributing factor.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, we will never say seek medical attention.
Yeah,
absolutely. If you're experiencing chest pains and you're experiencing digestive issues
Or
and
walls
anxiety
closing in on
attacks, go see a
Right.
doctor. We cannot stress that enough, right?
So we just
This is
want to go through some of these things. They're actual physical, like physical manifestations in some of the language that we were reading. Under stress, your heart pumps faster. Stress hormones cause your blood vessels to constrict, and you divert more oxygen to your muscles, so you have more strength to take action. But it also raises your blood pressure, and as a result, frequent or chronic stress will make your heart work too hard for too long.
Eek.
Right? And if you already have, like, say you have chronic heart issues because your family, like genetically, this isn't good for you.
No.
Right? And what we're seeing is, even in the studies for people that are doing heart stress or just life stress, is that even if you didn't have a chronic issue, you can actually stress yourself into having chronic problems.
Yes. And like I would say heart palpitations as well. That was my own experience when I get stressed or filled with anxiety or fear or that, how can I describe it? Like a narrowing in.
Yeah.
I get chest tightness and chest or heart palpitations where my heart is like, you're almost like going into a hyperventilating, where you just can't control your breathing and things like that, right? So for me, that also is a symptom.
Yeah. Right. Well, and that's even some of the things that we read, that's actually a fairly normal. That's like having an anxiety attack. Your heart's your heart's palpitating,
yes.
Whatever you want to call it. Right.
Another article we read says stress induces chronic immune activation, which essentially just means that you trigger your immune system to function and fire at a level it's not supposed to.
And it's fighting the wrong thing.
And
it's fighting stress.
The wrong things, yes. And what they had said, which I thought was so fascinating, was that it alters health outcomes that resemble those seen in chronic inflammatory diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, which I was floored when I read that your response to stress and tension can actually alter health outcomes and resemble other illnesses and other inflammation illnesses, which is just mind-boggling that for those of us that, live in that state of nervousness, live in that state of always you're on edge, like the amount of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the burden that you're putting your body through it's overwhelming.
And I like how you said it. It's the burden you're putting your body through, partially because of the stress around you, but because you get to a certain place, you're just choosing this because that's what you know. You don't know anything else.
Right.
Right. And that's altered immune function. It can exacerbate symptoms in both physical and physiological illnesses. We got all of our information, or some of our information, from Psychology Today and the American Psychological Association. Super detailed in what they had here.
We're going to be referencing them
a few times. Yeah.
A few times. I thought it was one of the most fascinating things I had read as someone who suffered with anxiety, and I was always at a heightened level
for everything.
It didn't matter what it was. It could be non-triggering, triggering. There was always an undercurrent of anxiety. And what this is from a 2016 article from Psychology Today, says this: beware of the exterior in yourself or others, because here we go. Anger is a primary emotion underlying anxiety.
Right.
I remember when I read this the other day, I was just like, you have got to be kidding me.
Right.
That's sort of like the undercurrent of anxiety is a state of anger. It was surprising to me.
Right. Well, it shouldn't be like, even in Psychology Today, like what do we know? Like, see, my response isn't fight, flight, or freeze. It was always fight. I only had one, and it was always to fight with everything. And whenever I get, and still to this day, when I get to a certain level of stress, I just get angry. And how I face my stress is by dealing with the problem, but not necessarily always healthily, like dealing with angrily. right? And anger is such a powerful emotion, and when you're not, if you don't deal with your anger properly and you don't like have a proper outlet or learn how to manage it or learn how to be like, here's the thing that the world doesn't want to hear right now. Our current culture is like, if you have anger, that's okay, man. Like it's okay that you feel these things. You don't need to control that. No. There needs to be as a man, I'm saying this as a man, you need to control yourself. You need to have self-discipline. You need to be disciplined enough to know that, hey, I'm angry and not lash out.
And so do women.
Yes, but I can't say that to you because you're a woman. And like, Natalie, I need you to control your temper.
Right? I know I need to control my temper.
Well, here's the funny thing is your temper. I know how mad you are by how much French you speak to me in the moment. Like that's how I know things are going poorly, is if I get the French, right? So anger is a super powerful emotion. It is something if it's not dealt with, then it'll control your life.
Collins Dictionary defines tension as this, because we're kind of on the anxiety topic here. Right. Tension is the feeling that is produced in a situation when people are anxious and do not trust each other, and when there is a possibility of sudden violence or conflict. So that's Collins Dictionary's definition of tension, which I was just like, there's no... this is just going to get better if we keep in this attitude of tension.
Did you ever fear that I was going to be violent?
No.
But you knew that you were going to be facing conflict?
Yes.
Not violence. And the tough part about this is that may not be our story.
But that may be someone else's.
But that definitely is someone else's story, where they fear the anger because it might come with violence or some sort of violence, whether it's verbal abuse or emotional abuse or physical abuse. Like there's something that happens if you're not dealing with your anger, and often, but not always, often men struggle with that a lot more than women, I would say.
Yes.
In our experience.
Yes. And we didn't grab a statistic for how many percentage of men versus women go that route, but
I know that was definitely my problem. It was in anger. Yeah.
And there's lots of women that are just like that. Right. And I think there's an increase, or maybe not an increase, but more of an open awareness to men who suffer violence from women. Psychology Today also says these terrible twos. So that's
anxiety
and anger are the terrible twos. Increase your vulnerability to illnesses, especially upper respiratory, because it compromises your immune system. It exacerbates your pain and increases the risk of death from cardiovascular disease and from all sources of death. Wow. Like if that doesn't kind of alert you or wake you up, anger is more than an emotion. It's a conduit that intensifies anxiety.
Yeah. And we know someone in particular that lives their whole life on anxiety and anger. And they're constantly sick. They constantly have physical health problems. They go to the doctor all the time, and they never, ever get any resolution as to what's going on. The doctor says stress, and they don't want to believe it, but they live in anger and anxiety. And when you talk about it, it's just anger.
That's right.
And it's constant. It's constant. Been to the doctor many, many times, and there's never any health resolutions for it.
Or tools to cope with it, right? Sometimes like you're launched in a situation that is not your doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where something horrible has happened to you. These effects of tension and stress are like, it doesn't differentiate between if something was inflicted upon you or you inflicted it upon yourself, right? The end result is the same. Yeah. Tension and stress, this is what happens. And if you find yourself in a place where you need to get help in order to be able to see, hey, this is the result of this, or this is a result of something that you have allowed or that you kind of put on yourself, or that was inflicted upon you without your wanting. Seeing a therapist, seeing a psychologist or a counselor or anything, so valuable.
Well, and like, even if we were to just, as you're talking, just kind of breaking down these things, the stress that's easier to leave, unless you struggle with just taking on everything, but a stress that's easier to leave is, say, stress that's environmental. Like you go to work, you have to deal with your job from 9 to 5 or whatever that happens to be. that stress you can leave at work. Like you should be able to leave that at work, right? Like sometimes it comes home, but oftentimes that stress is something that is external and like an external stress that you have to deal with, but it's not emotional. It's not taking up rent in your head or taking up space in your head. It's not renting a spot in your head. But sometimes, oftentimes, marriage issues that are compounded are relationship issues or even friend-to-friend issues because they're more emotional and they're more it's not an external issue. It's an actual relational thing between me and you, is that when we can't resolve this issue, it causes tension. And that actually does rent space in your head.
That's right.
It does take space up in your heart. It actually affects the things because it's not something I can just leave. It's like I go to work, and which is what happens with people is that instead of using like going to work so it aids you in your relationship when you come home with your wife, they're going to work to hide from what's happening at home.
Exactly.
Right, which is what I did for a long time. I went to worked 15 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, so I didn't have to deal with what was going on at home. But there's that part. But those things, what happens is because they're piling up, it's external. It actually does take up space, and then it begins to sap your energy, and it saps how you make decisions, and it saps all of that because it's not an external problem; it's an internal issue now.
That's right, and it's not just big things like finances or having children or a diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's like, let me talk to the people pleasers out there.
Yeah.
Like, I refer to myself as a recovering people pleaser because the amount of stress and anxiety and tension that is created by my own doing of the motivation behind why I'm doing certain things because out of a fear that they won't like me or they will judge me or this or that or that. Like your brain is constantly overfiring. My brain was.
Yeah.
And it was just like almost make myself sick trying to be all things to all people.
Yeah.
And the thought of not being able to fulfill that role that no one put me in but myself was just not that I would like rather die, but it's overwhelming like that you feel like you will, implode if you don't live up to those expectations that no one put on you.
Right.
Or in my case anyways.
For people pleasers in particular.
Yeah. Right. And so this is that thing of like nothing was inflicted upon me. I inflicted those,
which actually
expectations. That's what I'm looking for.
Which actually was really hard for you and I to deal with at some points because I am not a people pleaser.
No.
And you were. And you would do things and I would never understand why are you doing that? It doesn't matter if that person is happy or not.
Yeah.
Like that's not good for you. It's better for them for sure. And it's actually causing you both stress. And I would say that and I would argue with you or fight with you about it. And it just caused undue stress because I'm not a people pleaser. I'm like, why did we have to do it this way? This doesn't make any sense. And this was really tough at certain points.
And setting healthy boundaries at the beginning created tension and stress because it was so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I remember my counselor saying, what is the worst thing that could happen if you say no?
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's a loaded gun.
They might not like me.
Question. I might be disowned. I might right? And you go through all of these things that have not happened.
Right.
But these are the processes that you have to walk through. And I'm at a place now where I can say no. And it is my favorite word because it's empowering, right? When you can get to a place of realizing that setting healthy boundaries is not a bad thing. It shouldn't induce stress and tension.
And the other thing is that if you don't resolve them, that emotional pull, that emotional fight, that emotional strain that you're experiencing, it really does spill over into all aspects of your life. It goes into your work, it goes into your relationships, your church.
Depression comes in full. It's like right after that. If you don't deal with it and you don't resolve it. And I lived it.
Right.
Where this sense of like utter hopelessness and you're so beat down that there doesn't seem to be a way up. And so you just perpetuate this cycle.
Yeah. Do you remember, there's a portion here that I think we should, actually talk about the effect that had on our kids. We will in one of our episodes. But the constant fighting and the stress and the stuff that we're going to, it becomes a problem and can cause issues actually in your children. And like behavioral issues, and there might be chronic issues because they're so stressed out because you two are constantly in conflict, right? And there's something that was said in one of these articles, I think it was in the APA one. Often children whose parents are unhappy in their marriages tend to act out or misbehave as a way of expressing their feelings.
Yeah.
Because they're not being heard, they're not being seen, they're not
And
being
it's
valued.
scary.
And it's scary to have that kind of thing. Do you remember
In the Walmart parking lot?
in the Walmart parking lot? We were at odds.
Oh, we were like all out. We had all of our children.
That
in the
wasn't
back,
when
and
your
they were-
dad passed. There was just a trip. We had come to visit Katie and Jeremy. We had come down for a trip, and we literally, it seemed like all we did was fight all the way down for the first few days, so much so that my mom was like, "Are you guys okay?" And we're like, "Yeah, we're fine. What do you mean, what's wrong? Like, we're not fighting."
And the thing is here, we're so dumb sometimes. We had a minivan, and we were in the front, and there was the middle seat sections and then the back seat sections. And we thought we were far enough away, so we weren't talking very loud. And
I'm not, but let's be honest.
well,
I'm not
I didn't think we were talking very
I'm not
loud,
that quiet when I'm angry.
but wasn't even thinking about our kids in the back seat listening to our conversation.
Was it 3 or 2?
We had all three.
All 3. That's right. This wasn't that many years ago, actually. It was probably only like 8 or 9, 10 years ago.
Well,
Was it longer?
yeah, it'd probably be 11.
Yeah. Anyway, and do you remember who was it that said to us?
Ezra.
Was it Ezra? What did he say?
We were just at odds with each other, and he was watching us, and he was sitting directly
He was in
diagonal to the passenger front seat. And I just happened to make eye contact with him, and I could just see the tears welled up in his eyes and spilling down his face, and it like caught me off guard. And I looked at him, I'm like, "Son, what is wrong?" And his little lip was quivering, and he's like, "You are always fighting." And I remember I looked back at you, and you looked at me, and it was like, talk about a light bulb
straight bulb
moment.
Because then we looked back at Rainan, and Rainan was actually crying too. And
Amherst was still
she was
young,
she's like,
right?
"What's going on? We're at Walmart."
She's still a baby, but you just
We looked at the boys, and they were both crying. And then Rainan said the same thing to us. You guys just have only, because he was older, he could speak more. He said, "You guys only have fought since we've left Prince George."
And it was in that moment that
We like right there. It was a light bulb. It changed us in that moment.
And so, when your children are hurting,
Yeah.
and if that doesn't move you, right?
Even thinking back to it, you're like, man, that was a hard reality.
Brought us to tears.
Right.
And we looked at each other and we're like, what are we doing?
Yeah. And then actually that we ended up having a really great trip. I remember that.
We did. And we're just like, kids, we are sorry.
Yeah.
Right. And it was kind of, out of the mouths of babes, right? Sometimes it takes their perspective to snap you out of it. And that's exactly what we needed. But to say that there aren't issues that spill over into everyday life, and it's a domino effect. If things aren't well with you, things
might not be well with the kids.
It spills over into your spouse. It spills over into your kids, into your home life, into your family, into your friends, into work, church, school, right? It just is a domino effect. And so we really want to spend some time in the next coming episodes and just really kind of break that down.
Well, and like even as we're thinking about what's the stress point in your own relationship? What is the conflict that you may be even talking about it every couple days, but you're just avoiding dealing with the issue? What's the stress point? What's the thing that you're sweeping under the rug? What's the problem or the tension that you have in your relationship that's actually causing you physical? It's not only is it emotional harm and spiritual harm and mental block, but what's that thing that's preventing your marriage from being the best it could be because you are unwilling to face that issue?
That's right.
Right.
And the hope is that this will just be
a push,
an informative, like, oh my goodness, perhaps this is kind of what's going on in my situation, which is, I mean, we needed that.
And our challenge to you is, when you hear this and you know where we're going with it, take an examination of your own heart, of your own relationship, of your own spouse or your relationship, and be accountable for your actions. Don't expect them to change just because, like, you are. You need to be responsible for you. But boy, what are the things that are stopping you from moving forward?
Exactly.
So we're looking forward to be able to continue on this. Just know that there is hope. Things can be changed. Restoration can happen. You can have a really great relationship.
Oh, 100%. And this is just being able to recognize tension and stress and the effects that has on your body. And then as we move into breaking that down to like conflict resolution and why holding on to tension and stress is so harmful to your marriage, perhaps it can offer some tools in your tool belt like it did for us.
Right. So if you like our podcast and you like what's coming up, it just means a lot when you share it. You let people know about Amplified Marriage. So we ask that if you have a topic or a question or anything like that, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook. You can DM us to those places, or you can email us at amplifiedmarriage@gmail.com. And as you've heard us say, we've said these words a few times in this podcast, but we believe that your marriage can be reset,
refreshed,
recharged,
and restored.
Thanks so much for listening.
Talk to you soon.